The silent shadow of a new beginning. All the evils of the past had ceased, and peace reigned over the lands. The hard-fought victories against darkness echoed across both Middle-earth and the New World. Humans, elves, dwarves, and all other races lived in the comfort brought by peace and renewal. Families flourished in joyful harmony, cities rose from the ruins of old battles, and hope sprouted anew. The green plains of Middle-earth resonated with elven songs, while towering castles and diverse cultures thrived in the New World. Even the tranquility of the Undying Lands, Valinor, stretched across every corner of both worlds. Yet, beneath this illusion of peace, a silent mistake lay hidden, one that no man, elf, dwarf, hobbit, or any being of either world had perceived. The evil that was believed to be vanquished had never truly perished. It had merely withdrawn into the shadows, waiting patiently, waiting and waiting. Watching from the darkness, it had bided its time, choosing the perfect moment, when both worlds were at their weakest, their most vulnerable. And then, without warning, it returned. A force unbound by time or space, a darkness that transcended the limits of the universe itself. It wove itself into the very fabric of existence, threading its way through the unseen crevices of reality. Its purpose was singular and absolute, to engulf both Middle-earth and the New World in one relentless shadow. A flawless scheme had begun to unfold, seeking to extinguish all peace, all hope, and all light. For years, this evil had meticulously crafted its inevitable resurgence, and none had noticed. Drunk on the illusion of eternal peace, the people of both worlds had convinced themselves that their struggles were behind them. But they had failed to grasp a fundamental truth. Evil is never truly destroyed. It does not vanish. It merely retreats, concealing itself in the forgotten corners of time, waiting for the moment to rise once more. That moment had now arrived. The darkness crept unseen through the veins of both worlds, spreading silently, unheard, unfelt. While the people of Middle-earth and the New World basked in the warmth of their imagined tranquility, the first whispers of the coming storm had already begun, and no one knew that the approaching darkness would soon shatter the fragile harmony binding their worlds together. 20 years later. Platform 9 3/4 at King's Cross Station was alive with the usual buzz of excitement as students prepared to board the Hogwarts Express. Families were scattered across the platform, some offering last-minute advice, while others rummaged through luggage in search of misplaced belongings. A thick cloud of steam billowed from beneath the train, carrying with it the faint scent of coal. Laughter and excited chatter filled the air, blending into the station's perpetual hum. Ron stood watching Lily, Luna, and Hugo with a somewhat restless expression. "They grow up so fast," he murmured, turning to Hermione with a small, wistful smile. "Yes," Hermione agreed, though her voice carried the weight of exhaustion. She was helping Rose arrange her luggage, while simultaneously scanning a document she had pulled from her bag. Ron noticed her distracted state, but chose not to comment. He knew well how easily Hermione could become lost in thought at moments like these. "Rose, make sure to organize your belongings neatly the moment you arrive at the castle," Hermione instructed, leaning down toward her daughter. Rose rolled her eyes. "Mum, I'm not you," she mumbled, but Hermione seemed not to hear. Nearby, Hugo tugged at his sister's sleeve. "You'll write to me, won't you?" he asked, his wide eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Rose smiled warmly at her younger brother. "Of course I will, you little wizard," she teased, ruffling his hair. Meanwhile, James, Albus, and Lily stood at the open door of the Hogwarts Express. The train let out a sharp whistle at intervals, signaling its imminent departure. The platform was a sea of hurried goodbyes and last embraces. "Lily, you're still not coming to Hogwarts this year," James pointed out smugly. "So don't even think about stepping inside before me. That's for the big kids." James, Lily shot back, placing her hands on her hips. Just one more year, and then I'll make sure you never have a moment's peace at Hogwarts. Enough, you two, Ginny intervened, stepping between them. She leaned down and pressed a kiss to Lily's cheek. Next year will be your time, sweetheart, but today, let's send your brothers off. James leapt into the compartment and hoisted his trunk into the overhead rack. Albus, however, hesitated on the threshold. The train gave a gentle lurch as if waiting for him to move. Harry noticed his son's apprehension and stepped beside him, resting a reassuring hand on his shoulder. He bent slightly so their eyes met. "The first step is always the hardest," he said gently. "But no matter which house you end up in, you'll always make us proud." Albus looked up at his father, his voice barely a whisper. "Really? Even if I'm not in Gryffindor?" Harry smiled. "Gryffindor, Slytherin, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, it doesn't matter. What's important is not where you belong, but who you are. You'll find your place, and no matter what, we'll always be here for you." Some of the tension in Albus's face eased. He squeezed his father's hand before turning toward the train. Ginny approached to embrace him, smoothing his hair as she did. "Remember," she said, her voice soft but firm, "no matter what James says, no one is braver than you." Albus managed a small smile and nodded before stepping aboard. From inside the compartment, James called out, "Come on, Al! I've taken up the whole space, but if you don't hurry, I might have to stuff you in with the luggage." "James," Ginny scolded, though there was a barely concealed laugh in her voice. James grinned through the glass and pointed at Lily. "Stay off this train next year, okay?" Rather than taking the bait, Lily simply stuck out her tongue at him. Albus, now inside, glanced out the window, his eyes following Harry and Ginny. Ginny was smiling and waving with both hands, while Harry stood beside Lily, waving as well, his expression warm. Just as the train began to pull away, Rose slipped into the compartment, settling into the seat beside Albus. "Hey, Al," she greeted cheerfully, shoving her trunk under the seat. "James hasn't been too awful to you yet, has he?" Albus smirked slightly. "Not yet," he replied, sneaking a glance at his older brother, who was lounging across from them, staring out the window and waving absent-mindedly. "Rose," Hermione's voice rang out from below, catching her daughter's gaze through the window. "Make sure you keep your trunk organized, and please, just this once, try not to scare anyone with your books on the first day, all right?" "Mother," Rose groaned, blushing slightly, but unable to suppress a grin. She waved a hand dismissively. All right, all right." James caught the exchange and couldn't help himself. "Rose, is your mom adding more rules every year? Are you supposed to keep a journal and send her daily reports now?" Rose shot him a withering look. "At least I'm not going to Hogwarts just to cause trouble like you." James threw up his hands in mock surrender. All right. You're perfect, I get it." As the Hogwarts Express picked up speed, the station began to shrink in the distance. Harry and Ginny stood together, their hands still raised in farewell. The echoes of laughter and parting words lingered on the platform as another generation of young witches and wizards set off toward a future of endless possibilities. The train's wheels began to move, slowly at first, metal grinding softly against the rails. Steam curled around the platform, rising in thick clouds that carried the scent of coal and iron. The rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks merged with the distant hum of the station, a steady heartbeat to the fading goodbyes. Families stood motionless on the platform, their gazes fixed on the train's windows, watching as their children disappeared into the distance. Hermione's eyes remained locked on Rose, her lips trembling slightly, though a proud smile lingered on her face. Ron, his hands stuffed deep into his pockets, glanced at James and Albus through the glass before murmuring, "By the end of the year, they'll know Hogwarts inside and out." Harry squeezed Ginny's hand. "Do you think James will still find a way to embarrass us?" he asked, smirking. Ginny let out a small laugh. "James will always find a way," she said, though her eyes were fixed on the retreating train, searching for Albus's face behind the glass. "But Albus, I think he still needs a little support. I just hope he finds his place." Hermione, catching Ginny's words, turned her head. "He will," she said with quiet certainty. "He and Rose, they'll balance each other." The train gathered speed, and the faces at the windows became blurrier, the outlines of waving hands dissolving into the thickening mist. Parents raised their hands in a final farewell, their figures silhouetted against the steam that drifted across the platform like a soft veil. Ginny exhaled slowly, turning to Harry with a wistful smile. "They've grown up," she murmured. "It all went by so fast, didn't it?" Harry nodded. "Yeah, but this is their time now, and we'll always be here, no matter what." Ginny turned to Lily. "Come on, love, let's go. How about a nice breakfast after this? What do you say?" "Pancakes," Lily declared, bouncing on her heels. As the Potters made their way off the platform, Ron and Hermione lingered a moment longer. The train was gone, but they stood as though they could still see their children's faces behind the glass, as if the echoes of their laughter still lingered in the air. Ron inhaled deeply before glancing sideways at Hermione. "So, it's done. Rose is off to Hogwarts," he said, his voice carrying a strange mix of amusement and something unspoken. "That's a big step, isn't it?" Hermione snapped her bag shut and checked her watch. "Yes," she replied briskly. "It's an important day. But my work isn't done. I need to get back to the Ministry. There are still some files I need to review." Ron's expression changed in an instant. His jaw tightened, and a flicker of frustration passed through his eyes. "Of course," he said, his voice laced with sarcasm. "Files. Because there's always another file, isn't there? No time to just pause. No time for us." Hermione turned sharply to face him. "Ron, don't start this now. I have responsibilities. The Ministry expects things from me." Ron let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. "The Ministry expects everything from you, Hermione, and you give it, every time. But what about us? What about the kids?" Hermione's expression hardened. "Ron, why are you making this my fault? I'm doing what I have to do. It's not just about me. It's about doing what's right. I have a duty to more than just myself." "A duty?" Ron repeated, his voice rising slightly. "And what's my duty, then? Running the shop? Carrying the weight of everything, while knowing I'll never be the important one?" For a moment, Hermione hesitated. There was something in Ron's voice, an edge of hurt, of quiet disappointment. But instead of choosing her words carefully, she spoke without thinking. "Ron, stop being so dramatic. We all have our roles. You keep Fred's memory alive. That's important." Something in Ron's face shifted. "Keeping Fred's memory alive?" he repeated, his voice quieter now, but no less wounded. "Hermione, the shop isn't just about Fred. It's about me, too. And sometimes I need to feel like I exist outside of that, maybe as a husband, maybe as a father." A flush crept up Hermione's cheeks, not from anger, but something closer to frustration, or perhaps even regret. Still, her voice remained firm. "Ron, we can't have this conversation right now," she said decisively. "I need to get back to work. And don't you have a shop to run?" Ron fell silent for a moment, lowering his gaze to the ground. Then, taking a deep breath, he responded sharply, "Yeah, I need to go. But this conversation isn't over, Hermione." Hermione watched him walk away for a few seconds. There was a flicker of concern in her eyes, but she said nothing. Adjusting her bag on her shoulder, she lifted her chin and strode off the platform. Ron stood still for a while, hands buried in his pockets. The crowd had nearly dispersed, leaving behind only an eerie silence. The sharp whistle of the Hogwarts Express still echoed faintly in the air, a lingering trace of the departing train. He exhaled deeply and finally began to walk, his steps uncertain, his mind scattered. Around him, witches and wizards had returned to their daily routines, some engaged in animated conversation, others carrying shopping bags through the busy streets. But Ron felt detached from their energy, trapped within the weight of his own thoughts. As he made his way through Diagon Alley, a burst of lively music from the shop's entrance momentarily pulled him from his daze. Peering through the window, he saw George still working, effortlessly entertaining a handful of customers whose laughter rang through the store. Ron's eyes lingered on the cheerful scene for a moment before he let out a quiet sigh, pushed open the door, and stepped inside. He made his way to the back of the shop, settling into the chair behind his desk. The shelves were lined with colorful boxes, enchanted toys, and glimmering sweets. But today, they all felt dull and lifeless to him. The shop, once filled with laughter and the shouts of excited children, felt like nothing more than a business now. His account ledger lay open before him, but he didn't have the energy to focus on numbers. His mind was elsewhere, somewhere in the past. He could still hear Fred's laughter, the way he always knew how to lift his spirits. This shop had once been their shared dream, their space for mischief and invention. But now everything felt different. From the front of the store, George's upbeat voice carried over the shelves, his effortless charm keeping the customers entertained. He was keeping the place alive, just as he always had. But Ron wasn't feeling it. A few times George had tried to joke with him, to pull him into the energy of the store, but Ron had only nodded in response. Even forcing a smile felt too exhausting. After a while, his gaze drifted to the edge of his desk, where a copy of the Daily Prophet lay unfolded. The bold headline caught his eye. Hermione Granger Weasley successfully defends New Magical Creatures Act. Beside the article was a photograph from the Ministry of Magic. Hermione stood with her usual composed determination, a proud but restrained smile on her lips. Even in a still image, she carried the weight of her responsibilities, her achievements evident in her very posture. Ron picked up the paper, scanning the lines of text as a strange mix of emotions welled up inside him. Pride, of course. Hermione had always been brilliant, hard-working, relentless, and fiercely determined. She was making a difference, changing the world, just as she always had. But alongside that pride, something else stirred, a quiet, gnawing sense of inadequacy. "Where am I in all of this?" he murmured under his breath. He had spent years preserving Fred's legacy, building the joke shop into something strong and lasting, but lately it didn't feel like enough. While Hermione soared in her career, making headlines, shaping the future, he felt stuck, left behind. Setting the newspaper down, he ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. For a fleeting moment, he could hear Fred's voice in his head, his brother's easy laughter, the way he always knew what to say. Fred had always believed that the Weasley twins could take on anything together. But Fred was gone, and Ron, sitting here in this shop, felt like he was standing still while the world moved on without him. He looked around the store once more, the bright wrappers, the enchanted sweets, the shelves full of playful inventions. Every inch of the shop carried Fred's spirit. But no matter how vibrant the place was, the growing emptiness inside him remained untouched. Then from the front of the store, George's voice called out, cheerful and unbothered. "Oi, Ron! Could use a hand here? Can you check the stock on the new fizzing bonbons?" Ron hesitated for only a second before rising to his feet. "Yeah, I'm coming," he replied, though his voice lacked its usual enthusiasm. As he moved toward the shelves, his mind lingered on the newspaper, on the image of Hermione, on the question that wouldn't leave him. And even as he reached for the boxes of sweets, he still didn't have an answer. George had noticed his brother's distracted state. "You all right, Ron? You seem a bit off today," he said, studying him carefully. Ron forced a smile and nodded. "I'm fine. Just a little tired, that's all." George gave him a friendly nudge on the shoulder. "All right, but if you need a break, just say the word. Even the shop can get a bit much sometimes," he added with a grin. Taking George's offer to leave early, Ron stepped out of the shop and into the bustling street. Diagon Alley was as lively as ever. people laughing, shopping, going about their lives. But Ron felt entirely disconnected from it all. His mind was a battlefield, torn between Hermione's successes, his own life, and the vast space between them. The feeling of inadequacy gnawed at him relentlessly. When he arrived home, he found Hermione in the kitchen. She was preparing dinner with her wand, the pots and utensils moving fluidly under her silent command. She looked up as he entered and smiled, but her expression quickly shifted to concern when she noticed his face. "Hey," she greeted, her voice warm yet tinged with hesitation. She wanted to pretend their argument from that morning hadn't happened. "How was your day?" Ron shrugged, hanging his jacket over a chair. "Same as always," he replied curtly, a faint coldness in his tone. Hermione noticed, but chose to steer the conversation elsewhere. "I was thinking about Rose today. I still can't believe how fast she's grown. I wonder how she's settling in at Hogwarts." Ron looked at her, his gaze steady. "I'm surprised you had time to think about that," he said, his voice edged with sarcasm. "According to the paper, you had another big success today. Congratulations." The smile on Hermione's face faded instantly. "Ron, what are you talking about? The article?" "Yes, it's true. I defended the new legislation, and why does that bother you?" Ron sat at the edge of the table and exhaled deeply. "It doesn't bother me, Hermione. I'm proud of you. But sometimes, just sometimes, I want to feel like not everything is about you. While you shine, where does that leave me?" Hermione could hear the pain in his voice, but she didn't know how to respond. "Ron, I understand that you feel this way, but it's not fair. I'm just doing my job." "Yeah, you're doing your job," Ron said, his tone hardening. "But you're always doing your job. The kids, me, our life. Sometimes it feels like it all exists in the shadow of your career." Hermione's patience was wearing thin. "Ron, that's not fair. I work because I have to. The ministry expects it from me. I'm trying to set a good example for our children." Ron stood up, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, you're a great example. Hermione Granger Weasley, successful, brilliant, perfect at the ministry. But what about me? I've been running the shop since Fred died, doing my best, but I'm still stuck in Harry's shadow. And now, am I in yours too?" Hermione was stunned. "Ron, I had no idea you felt this way, but you're everything to us. You're a hero to our children. You're the balance in my life. Why can't you see that?" Ron was silent for a moment, breathing deeply before shaking his head. "Maybe I can't see it, Hermione. Maybe—" The words caught in his throat. "I just need some time alone." Hermione started to say something, but Ron was already heading for the door. She glanced towards the stairs, knowing Hugo was in his room, and kept her voice low. "Ron," she called, but her voice was weak, almost pleading. But Ron had already stepped outside. The cool evening air hit his face as he walked, not knowing exactly where he was going. His mind was filled with echoes of their argument, replaying every word, every feeling, every frustration that had left him so lost. Before he even realized it, he found himself standing in front of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. The shop was silent now, the once bustling storefront dimly lit from within. He hesitated at the door, staring at the place that had once been filled with laughter, with Fred's voice, with the sound of children marveling at their magical creations. But now there was only quiet. Taking a deep breath, he pushed the door open and stepped inside. The silence within felt vast, echoing the emptiness he had been carrying. The shelves, filled with bright packaging and enchanted toys, looked strangely dull to him tonight. He walked over to his desk and sank into the chair, exhaling heavily. His fingers idly reached for one of Fred's favorite prank boxes, turning it over in his hands. The motion was habitual, but there was no spark in it. It felt hollow, just like everything else. His gaze fell on the drawer beside him, and when he pulled it open, his eyes landed on something familiar, the Deluminator. Dumbledore had given it to him long ago, a device that had once guided him back when he had lost his way. It had led him through darkness before, Ron picked it up, rolling it between his fingers. After a moment, he pressed the small button on its side. One by one, the lights in the shop flickered out, plunging the room into complete darkness. He stood there, enveloped in the quiet void, the blackness mirroring the chaos inside him. Then he pressed the button again. The lights returned, but the shop didn't feel the same. Everything felt frozen in time. Pressing the button once more, the lights vanished again. But this time, something was different. From within the darkness, a small beam of light emerged from the deluminator. It floated into the air, twisting and curling through the shop like a living thing. It was soft but radiant, weaving through the shelves and filling the empty space with a strange, searching energy. Ron's breath caught in his throat, his eyes widening. He watched as the light gathered in the center of the room, intensifying as if reaching for something unseen. Then, within the light, a shape began to form. His heart pounded as he stared, and as the glow solidified, he recognized the silhouette standing before him. Tall robes, a long flowing beard. Ron's breath hitched. Dumbledore. The wise, familiar face gazed back at him, a knowing, gentle smile curving at the edges of his lips. Just as he had looked all those years ago at Hogwarts, time seemed to freeze. Ron's eyes burned with unshed tears, his throat tightening. He didn't know why Dumbledore was here. He didn't know if this was real or just some trick of light and memory. All he knew was that this light, this moment, was trying to tell him something.